Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we've got a wonderful show today because we have somebody on who lost a mom, and that is such a hard thing. And she's a wonderful singer, and she's taken her life to a whole new level and dealing with God and grief stages and all sorts of things.
As you said, Mom, we're going to talk about missing my mom, Lord, hear my cry, with Frankie Orella. And Frankie is a Nashville singer-songwriter. At the age of 17, her mother died of cancer. And she started her music career, Mom, in church. She was a writer and she led music.
Wow.
So welcome to our show, Frankie.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And we love having music on. Music is so important to the world. I wanted to ask you, before your mom died, did you grow up in the church? Were you involved in music?
Yes, I was actually. I started leading worship at our local youth group when I think I was 13. So I was pretty young. My mom was on staff at the church. She was our pastor's assistant. And then my dad is a musician. So he kind of did stuff with the kids. But that's kind of how I was always into music. I grew up listening to the Beatles. But my dad, he was very passionate about me loving really good music. But I think I started doing a lot of things just out of the church and out of need. They needed someone to lead music. And they were like, Frankie, you're musical. I'm like, I'm 13. I can play guitar, but that's all I got.
How about your mom? Did she have a long-term illness or?
She did. So actually the same year I started leading worship when I was 13. This was probably 2004 or 5. I can't 100% remember, but she was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
and it was
long road. How many years did she have it?
5.
Wow. Oh, so you really had a community there to support you through this?
We really did. And it changed. I think part of the reason I am now so passionate about grief is, I think the church was really beneficial. There were individuals in the church who were very helpful and really came alongside, like my dad, and I have a younger sister. The 3 of us, I was 17, my sister was 12. But I would say the church as a whole struggles to engage in the conversation of grief. And so that was interesting for me to try and process while grieving, especially having a mom who was on staff in a church.
When did you decide you wanted to change it through your music?
I think I pretty immediately started writing songs when my mom was diagnosed to begin with. I think that was my way of coping, honestly. My family was not one that was really open to talking about problems. So it was kind of like no one wanted to do any kind of counseling. That was kind of like, that's for crazy people, that's how it was communicated to me. And so for me as a 13-year-old, I just started processing what I was feeling, what I was experiencing through song. So I would sit in my bedroom, just write everything from the pain, from the joys, from whatever it was. Like that was my way of coping. And so when she passed away, I continued to do that. That was my way of grieving, honestly, and processing what I was feeling.
That's interesting you say that, because we've had a number of musicians who've been on that said that they couldn't write anything for a while. So you didn't find that happen to you?
No, it was strange. It was the only place I felt safe. Because my family situation was not great after my mom passed away. And so there's a lot of unknown, there's a lot of fear, because everyone grieves differently. I mean, you all know probably far more than I do, but even watching my dad try and figure out what's a new normal, him bringing different women into the house, it was bizarre and hard for a 17-year-old to try and process.
And I think the music is so amazing in those, when you're going through all that, because you can say things and people can hear things if it's in a song.
Sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's why music's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You know, one of the songs that I've listened to that you have online, but I love that "Hear My Cry." When I heard
Mm.
that, that was just so intense. Talk about that
Mm.
song a little bit because I want to play it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that one actually wasn't necessarily, I mean, it didn't come right after my mom passed away. So I would say starting in 2016, I went on staff at a church plant, which basically means a larger church plants another one in another community that maybe doesn't have a lot of churches in it. And so the church that my mom had been on staff at and that I had started leading worship at planted a church in South Nashville. So my husband and I moved over here. 2 years into the plant, there was a family, I think this was 2018, some good friends of ours, the husband who helped me with worship on Sunday mornings a lot, because that's what I was doing. I was doing music for the church. That was like my full-time job. His daughter was diagnosed, who was 6, diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma.
Yeah.
And then a few weeks after that, my husband actually was diagnosed with chondrosarcoma, which is a bone tumor, and both bone tumors. And so trying to process that, especially in this little church community, you know, there are 50 to 70 of us meeting, and it wrecked me. I was like, I don't understand. I don't know why God allows these things. It was frustrating. And so I sat down with a friend of mine, and we were working on actually something different, a different song. And I was like, I feel like this is heavy on my heart and I want to write about it. And so that's kind of where that came from, is feeling like the community I was in was being hit so hard with just grief, just really hard, painful things. And as humans, we're always trying to process, like, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does it say about my belief system? How does this go alongside it? Can they exist together? And I think as a Christian, what I've seen a lot in the church is people kind of just pat you on the back and say, it's okay, like God has a plan. All things work together for those who love him, and all these things that I've heard my whole life. And it made me angry. I was like, there's a time for that, and it may be truth. But I think what people need to know when they're in the midst of extreme pain and suffering is that God is present with them. He is sad with us.
Let's hear that song. It's called "Hear My Cry."
Out of my panic, out of my looking for the answers, out of my anger, out of my thinking I know better. Hear my cry, Lord, hear my cry. Out of my hurry, out of my need to fill the silence, out of my hurting, out of my blame becoming violent. Hear my cry, Lord, hear my cry. You're never too far away to meet me in my hiding place. I've never too dark a thought for you to turn your face away. Even when I stop believing, even when the words run dry, you hear my cry. hear my cry. You hear my cry. You're never too far away to meet me in my hiding place. Of a never too dark a thought for you to turn your face away. Even when I stop believing, even when the words run dry, you hear my cry. You hear my cry.
Oh my gosh, Heidi, powerful, huh?
Really powerful.
That just must bring people to their knees when they hear it, or tears or whatever, doesn't it?
I have gotten a lot of really just, I think, affirming feedback, just in a sense of hearing that people need to be reminded of that he hears us, that he's not distant, because he can feel distant when hard things happen. And so it was cool to be able to share the song with like my friends and the people who are experiencing hard things at our church. And so that was,
I like this,
yeah.
Frankie. People need to know that even though they might feel alone, they're not alone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's like the greatest fear as a human, right? Is to be abandoned, to be by yourself. And
be angry at God. Were you angry at God?
Absolutely. I still struggle with anger. Yeah. That's a day-to-day thing,
Uh-huh. And what do you do when you feel angry? Because I know there are people saying, wow, I struggle with it.
I think for me, it's been really healthy to just acknowledge anger for what it is. And know, I had a counselor tell me one time that anger is a secondary emotion a lot of times. And so there's usually something underneath of it. And for me, it's usually sadness of just that things aren't the way they should be. That we live in a world that is broken in a lot of senses, and things just don't happen in a very gracious, beautiful way a lot of times. And so, for me personally, processing that anger and feeling it, because I think God can handle anger. I mean, he created the universe. He can handle me being really mad. He's not offended.
Tell us what the project you're working on now is.
Yeah. So I think it's really cool that Hear My Cry, just getting to talk about that, and that you guys really loved that one. I think that's kind of where me wanting to do something for the 5 stages of grief came from, is from writing that song. And I think just my eyes being opened in a lot of ways to my community and how they were responding to this. It was like no one had ever told them it was okay to talk about grief, to talk about the anger, to talk about the depression, the anxiety, the stuff that's not very pretty, that maybe we don't like to talk about in our culture. And so it really kind of lit a fire under me, in a sense of like, this is important. And as an artist, I have a voice. So how do I talk about something that I've experienced, that my friends are experiencing? How do I make this into art, in a sense, art that's tangible, and give someone words to maybe what they can't describe? So that, I think, that's kind of where this project came from. So it's the 5 stages of grief explored through song. So there'll be a song a month. Denial is out. Anger is coming out February 7th. And then bargaining, depression, acceptance to follow. So it'll kind of finish out in May. And each month a song releases. The goal is to kind of put content around that, talk about my own experience, and then ask some of my other friends and have them kind of chime in on what their journey has been. But it's been really cool to see how it sparked so much conversation in my community, and the things that people will message me, or friends that will call me who I know really well, be like, hey, I had this thought about my brother who was killed in a car accident last year. I had a friend who lost her sibling, and just things that she's not necessarily comfortable to share with anyone, but she's like, oh, you're like the grief girl. You talk about grief.
They can go on your site and
Yes,
look
ma'am.
at the YouTube of Denial.
Yes.
Or they can listen to it or whatever.
On Spotify, iTunes.
Yeah. So let's hear a little piece of that right now.
Look where we are. We've made it far. The overgrowth is breaking apart as we walk, as we run. Hold on to me and let's chase the sun. Don't look down now. Don't look down. Step by step, don't rush ahead. Winter's kind, she gives you breath. Pain will come, for now you're numb. Take my hand, keep looking up. Don't look down now. Don't look down.
Oh, great. What a project.
No one grieves the same way. And so I laugh because it's kind of like, even though these stages, people are like, oh, so is it literally just you go through the stages and you're done? I'm like, no, this is like a lifetime thing.
If you had some tips for people, what would you have, and as far as how you've coped?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that a counselor has shared with me that has been really helpful for me is not trying to convince myself that I don't feel how I feel on any given day. So if something triggers me and I'm really sad, I need to feel the sadness and not, tell myself or have someone else tell me like, you don't need to be sad. It's okay because X, Y, and Z. Like, no, I'm going to feel this because it's important. And this is actually healing for me. And then not being afraid to tell people that's where you are. Like, I think honesty really is the best policy with stuff like this. Very practical thing for me, just for my own mental health, is exercising and being outside.
Well, thank you so much for being on our show today and for everything that you do. And tell people how to find you on the net.
Yes, so I'm on Instagram, Frankie Orella, Orella. It's Frankie with an IE, not a Y. And then frankieorella.com is my website. You can find me on Facebook as well. I have a page there, Apple Music, Spotify, all under the same name.
Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening to this show today. And Heidi and I always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.